Eva Brennan was born in Rathdown Park Terenure, Dublin 6. She disappeared on July 25th, 1993, one day short of 4 months following Annie McCarrick's disappearance. However, Eva's disappearance was silent. There was no media coverage, no search parties, complete and utter indifference from law enforcement. At the time of her disappearance, Eva was living in her own apartment in Rathgar Dublin 6. She had been in her parents' house this day. She had left and simply disappeared. So why did Eva's case not get any publicity, and why did her father have to contact the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister, before law enforcement would get involved? Well, let's take a look at Eva. Try get a feel of who she was, what her life was like, and perhaps more importantly, who she knew and why she might have disappeared. I'm going to warn you straight away, today's case takes us on a dark journey. The information I came across while researching for Eva's case was unexpected. In fact, I was wondering how I could find out some more information about Eva, because there just doesn't seem to be that much information in the public domain, or at least in the mainstream media. So I did find more information, but it is very dark. However, I, along with thousands of others, find it credible. You know, on this channel I don't believe in not talking about it, including cover-ups. And I'm not saying this case was a cover-up. In fact, everything I say about theories and accusations are alleged, because this is an open and ongoing case. Eva Brennan is still officially a missing person. I will give you a warning before I delve into any of this darker stuff, in case you would prefer not to listen to it. I'm Louise. This is a drop in the ocean. Let's dive in. In 1993, Eva Brennan was 39, but looked 10 years younger. She led a quiet life, a life of routine. Eva was very religious. She was a devout Catholic. On the day she disappeared, Sunday, July 25th, she had been at Mass that morning, as she did every morning, before heading to her parents' house, Davy and Eileen, for dinner, as she would do every day, where her 6 siblings would also be gathered. Eva was third eldest in a very close family of 4 brothers and 3 sisters. This day was a beautiful summer's day, 18 degrees Celsius, which in Ireland is considered gloriously warm. She arrived at her parents' house around 2:30 in the afternoon. The family dinner that day was lamb, which was roasting away in the oven, but Eva didn't eat lamb. So she went off in a huff over their choice of meat for dinner that day, to return to her own apartment in Rathgar. Now, this was a nice part of Dublin, considered safe. Personal safety and security were priority for Eva and her family. Her parents had helped her choose her apartment in Madison House, Rathgar, which was within walking distance of the family home and situated in a respectable part of south side Dublin. They advised her not to take the ground floor for added security. One of her father's 2 very successful pubs, the 108, was situated just down the road, literally 1 to 2 minutes walk for Eva. Their other pub, the Horse and Hound, was located just in Cabinteely. The income from both pubs meant Eva and her sisters didn't have to work, so they were comfortable. Eva had lived in the apartment, having moved 3 years prior from her parents' house, and with the family pub just down the road, it seemed they had everything covered. So the following day, the Monday, Eva didn't arrive at her parents' house as usual, which was part of her daily routine, and her routine never changed. Although this was unusual, they let this one day go. Then Tuesday, Eva still didn't arrive. Her father, Davy, went to her apartment to check in on her. He rang the doorbell but got no answer. So he ran across to the 108 and asked his son to come over with him. They broke a window to gain entry, but Eva wasn't there. The apartment was spotless. No signs of a struggle, no signs of a break-in, nothing out of place, everything very clean. And Eva's jacket, which she had been wearing in the family home that Sunday, was there. So they knew Eva had returned to her apartment, at least briefly, long enough to leave her jacket in. But after that, they simply had nothing to go on. They immediately alerted the gardai, but nothing happened. Eva was over 21, an adult, and she could do as she wished, they were told. And also, of course, Eva had suffered from bouts of depression, so she had probably taken her own life. The following day, Davy Brennan returned to the Garda station again to give them more details about Eva. Davy Brennan was a well-connected man. a successful businessman with political ties, a lifelong member of Fianna Fáil, the leading political party. And yet his daughter vanished and no one would do anything. No media coverage, just nothing. Something that was still flooding the media, nationally and internationally, was the disappearance of Annie McCarrick, the lady we spoke about in our last video. And rightly so. Annie's family had also been told Annie is an adult, and for that reason a full week passed before law enforcement would begin investigating Annie's disappearance. But then a huge search operation would take place, and was still taking place at this time when Eva Brennan disappeared, with one of the leading detectives on Annie's case, Detective Smith, featuring in the New York Times, saying, Detective Smith said the search had included circulating posters, checking with hospitals, interviewing neighbours and anyone who knew Miss McCarrick, and checking plane, rail and bus terminals, as well as car rental agencies. So with nothing else happening, Eva's family began to search themselves, going door to door, asking everyone, have you seen Eva or do you know where she might be? Handing out posters, doing interviews with any media they could, driving all over the place searching for anything that could lead them to Eva, but no one had seen her. Eva's mother stayed in their house, waiting in the kitchen every day for Eva to come home, but she never did. Eva's mother would continue to do this for 3 years. The last sighting of Eva would be from that Sunday, when Eva had left her parents' house in Terenure and Eva was heading in the direction of her apartment in Rathgar. There was a sighting of Eva as she left her parents' home. The surprising thing about this is there was just one sighting. Eva and her family were from this area and would have been very well known, with 2 successful pubs, and her father was involved in successful racehorses, so they were extremely well known in the area. Plus Eva was wearing a distinctive pink tracksuit. She would have had to pass through Terenure village and crossing 2 busy parts of the road, and it would have taken her just over 20 minutes. Also remember, this was a lovely summer's day, 18 degrees Celsius. It was also a Sunday, the Sunday of a bank holiday weekend. So people would have been visiting their families, they would have been just out walking, getting fresh air, or going for a drive. But no one else saw Eva. No one has ever seen Eva Brennan since then. Did she perhaps meet someone on the way back to her apartment? Perhaps agree to go to a prayer meeting, but drop her jacket into her apartment on her way? I ask this because a prayer group is the only real place Eva would have gone. She would go to mass in the mornings, she would visit her parents, she would go shopping. She wasn't inclined to leave her apartment otherwise. But Eva didn't turn up to a prayer service or anywhere else. She had dropped her jacket off at her apartment, so she was on her way somewhere at the time. And her prayer groups seemed to be the only place she would meet people she may have believed she could trust. Despite being one of Ireland's famous disappeared women, Eva Brennan was initially not even included in Operation Trace, which I mentioned in the previous episode, which was set up in 1998 to look at the links between our missing people in this area at this time. The person who went missing 4 months before Eva, Annie McCarrick, and after Eva, Jojo Dollard. They are included. Eva is often not even included in this so-called vanishing triangle. But why is that? Let's look at some of the theories. Eva had an ex-boyfriend who was questioned, but he was living in Liverpool at the time, and nothing further came of this line of inquiry. Michael Bambrick. The Irish police raised the question of Eva possibly knowing Michael Bambrick, who lived in Clondalkin, who was arrested in 1995 and convicted of the manslaughter of 2 different women and their dismemberment between 1991 and 1993. Both of his known victims, Patricia McGauley and Mary Cummins, were known by him and were buried by him at his house. However, they couldn't find any links between Eva and this monster. Eva wouldn't have been in Clondalkin for any reason. It seems she probably never even met him. Michael Bambrick, who was released in 2009, is now free. Larry Murphy. Larry Murphy is a notorious Irish convicted felon, jailed for 10 years in 2000 for the kidnapping, assault and attempted murder of a woman in Carlow. So yes, he was released in 2010. He is also a free man. Larry was a master carpenter, and during the summer of 1993, when Eva disappeared, her father was having work done on his pub, the 108, which was very close to Eva's apartment. Eva's parents put this to law enforcement to check out the whereabouts of Larry Murphy during this time period, as it could have been possible, as a freelance carpenter, that he was working on the 108. But law enforcement never responded to them. I don't know why. I will be covering Larry Murphy in a separate video, and he is suspected of and possibly connected to other crimes against women. Reportedly, Eva's family did hire a private detective, but no new leads seem to have been uncovered. I've spoken about cover-ups on this channel previously. As some of you know, this was not my intention when I began earlier this year. I had no idea the rabbit holes I would fall into. But you can't unknow something, contrary to some popular belief. So I will continue, although I have no idea what actually happened to Eva Brennan. She deserves for us to explore all avenues, as do all of our missing people. So here is your warning. If you're not comfortable with hearing about accusations and theories surrounding our missing people, time to make an exit. I know there are people who don't like to hear these things discussed, and I genuinely don't want to upset anyone. So click away now and look after yourself, and maybe I'll see you in the future. So Eva didn't go out unless she had to go shopping, go to her parents' house, go to mass in the mornings, or go to a prayer service. She pretty much stayed at home in her apartment. Eva was a member of a local prayer group, as I mentioned earlier, the Legion of Mary prayer group, through which Eva had known a young boy you may have heard of. If you are Irish, you will have heard of him. His name was Philip Carnes, and he attended this group. Philip Carnes was a 13-year-old boy who went missing during a 10-minute gap when he left his house to go back to school. And he has never been seen since. And this was in 1986. Now, I'm not going to go into Philip's case here, but I will at a later date. Reportedly, Eva had become good friends with little Philip, who disappeared in 1986. And Eva was troubled by Philip's disappearance and was asking questions. Another person who also attended this same prayer group was another of our disappeared women, who is also not included in the coverage of the Vanishing Triangle, and whose disappearance is eerily similar to Eva's, and whose case I will be covering. So we will discuss all this again later on when I get to that episode. But it has been put out there that Eva was possibly asking too many questions, or perhaps from the wrong people, about what happened to little Philip, that she was perhaps getting too close to the truth. So to give you some context around these allegations, and I will explain to you where I'm getting them from, I'm going to touch on some certain topics here for anyone who might not know who or what I'm referring to. And from here on, this is where this gets dark. So, final warning. I'm about to be touching on some very sensitive topics. It's your last chance to click away. The Ryan Report was the result in 2009 of an extensive investigation into allegations of child abuse which had taken place in a variety of church and state-run institutions in Ireland, such as industrial and reformatory schools, orphanages, children's hospitals, and other residential institutions for children. The inquiry covered the period from the 1930s to the 1990s. The report documented cases of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. It also highlighted a culture of severe discipline, neglect, and the failure of authorities to intervene to protect children. In response to the findings, the Irish government issued a formal apology to the victims of abuse, of which there were thousands. The Murphy Report was the result, again in 2009, following the Ryan Report, of an investigation into the Catholic Archdiocese of Dublin. While the Ryan Report had a broader scope, investigating the actual abuse in various institutions, The Murphy report specifically focused on the handling of abuse cases within the Catholic Church's structure in the Archdiocese of Dublin. These reports showed widespread, horrific, systemic abuse which was actively covered up and allowed to continue by both church and state. Archbishop John Charles McQuaid was the Archbishop of Dublin from 1940 to 1972. He's deceased since 1973. He was known as a political and religious leader, the most powerful man in Ireland during his reign. This man was responsible for the incarceration of women and girls in our mother and baby homes and Magdalen laundries, of interfering in adoptions, including forced adoptions, the survivors tell us, and was found guilty, not in a court of law, but by the Murphy report, of deliberately and repeatedly covering up the widespread clerical sex abuse throughout his diocese, of children, of ignoring complaints, of just moving priests around if there was any fear of them being found out or exposed, and of never reporting claims to law enforcement. He later had allegations made against him for being an abuser also. I could not find any update on these allegations. Archbishop Dermot Ryan was McQuaid's successor until 1984 and continued to have actively participated in the cover-up of child abuse, the Murphy report also found. Of ignoring complaints, again of just moving priests around if there was a likelihood of them getting found out, and of never reporting claims to law enforcement. Father Patrick Toohey, parish priest of Rathfarnham, was never charged with a crime, but reportedly following him being moved to Rathfarnham in 1973, he immediately began abusing children, young boys. Toohey set up a recycling centre, where he reportedly encouraged young boys from the local vicinity to come and help out, and where he, supported by a number of local businessmen, would abuse boys. This priest was relieved of his duties as a parish priest a mere fortnight after young Philip Carnes disappeared, without any reason being given. He continued to be a priest, but without so much access. Sources say this amount of cover-up and protection for paedophiles, not children, led to and allowed the formation of a ring in this area. Not only of clergymen, but of high-profile businessmen too. These men were never criminally charged with any crimes. But just a side note, in August 2018, a list was released revealing that of the 1,300 Irish clergy who were accused of abuse, only 82 were convicted. Just a side note. Now, the other side of all this regarding law enforcement is that law enforcement and senior members of law enforcement colluded with the church to cover up this scandal when complaints would be made to them about children being abused by priests, bishops, any clergymen, or anyone else of importance. They would simply pass it back to the archdiocese, the archbishop, so nothing would ever happen. At most, a priest would be moved to another area, or would have his access to children limited, be demoted in some capacity. Gareth O Callahan. Gareth is a well-known Irish broadcaster, writer, and mental health and justice campaigner, but has also emerged as a resilient survivor of sexual abuse. His open discussions on the topic have resonated with a wide audience, as is obvious by his substantial social media following. Gareth uses his platforms to shed light on the harsh realities of abuse, creating a space where survivors have felt able to come forward and confide in him about the circumstances surrounding their own abuse. This courageous outreach has unveiled a trove of information regarding some of our missing persons. Although navigating anonymity and defamation laws presents many challenges, Gareth's impactful efforts expand our understanding of the darker aspects of society. You can connect with him on Facebook and X, formerly Twitter, using his name, Gareth O Callahan. The information I am presenting to you here, I only have thanks to the official reports from the investigations and Gareth O Callahan speaking out with others following. I have simply collaborated the information from these sources and I'm relaying it here to you. As always, all sources will be linked in the description. Brian Ellis. Brian Ellis is the now deceased son of Vincent Ellis, surgeon to the Garda Síochána, a Garda surgeon, one rank down from commissioner in Garda rank structure. He held this position up until 1958. His son Brian Ellis was an engineer. Richard Kavanagh. Richard Kavanagh was a friend of Brian Ellis. He was also a gardener and tended to Brian Ellis's garden. Richard told Broadsheet, quote, "The man I knew was very weird and was into boys, and he should be considered a suspect because of what he told me." He was speaking about Brian Ellis in regards to Philip Carnes' disappearance. He alleged he had reason to believe little Philip was buried in Brian Ellis's garden in Terenure. Another source claims to have reason to believe Eva Brennan is also buried there. Law enforcement have this information since 2010. However, they said they need more evidence before a warrant to excavate or investigate this garden would be permitted. I could be wrong, but I believe if Eva Brennan's case or Philip Carnes' case was upgraded to a murder investigation as opposed to a missing persons investigation, this would make accessing and investigating this area a lot more accessible. On Facebook, October 8, 2016, Gareth O Callahan discusses Philip Carnes, Eva Brennan and the other missing person, which we will also talk about, signing off on this post with, quote, "I also understand from all I am being told that there was one individual who knew them all as a result of stalking each of them, and his name is Brian Ellis," unquote. So if Eva Brennan did meet someone that day, who might it have been? Well, Brian Ellis was also a member of this prayer group, the Legion of Mary prayer group. Not only that, but he lived on the same street, and another of our disappeared women also lived on this street and was in this same prayer group. It doesn't look like any of this is going to be investigated. Eva's case remains a missing person. They have not upgraded it to a murder case, as they did with Annie McCarrick's case. Changing it to a murder inquiry would mean excavations could be ordered. Do you think they will excavate for Eva? Perhaps she just knew too much. What do you think? Both Eva's parents have passed away without getting any justice for Eva. So has Eva's sister Kadet, who had spoken with the media on numerous occasions, trying to find out what happened to her sister. Talk about a dark web. Do let me know what you think, but please keep in mind, anyone could be reading your comments. We've got to be sensitive in what we say. I am sorry you had to listen to something so dark, but I am sorrier that it's possible that this is what happened. We know it was going on. Did Eva get caught up in this? Eva Brennan deserves to be remembered and found, and I truly hope Eva's siblings and family get answers and get to bring Eva home. In one of her media appearances, Colette, Eva's sister, said people should know that Eva had a family that loved her very much. Quote, "I miss her to this day, and I think of her every day. Whoever killed Eva has damaged an awful lot of people that are very, very sad," unquote. Colette passed away in 2016. When last seen, Eva Brennan was wearing a pink tracksuit and leggings, a man's wristwatch with a brown strap, and she carried a red leatherette bag about 8 inches by 10 inches with a flap to the front. Eva Brennan was 5'7" in height, with short brown hair and big blue eyes. She was wearing a pink tracksuit and white runners when she went missing. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Gardai in Terenure, Dublin at 01 6666 400. Thank you very much as always for again giving this case your much needed attention. Take care of yourselves. Good luck and bye bye.